Be me, name is Garrett. 44 years old, senior floor manager at Titan Logistics. Standing in what used to be aisle 7. Now it's a mountain of crushed inventory. Broken pallets, shattered products, twisted racking. $4.7 million in damage. Conservative estimate. Real number is probably higher. A forklift is on its side. Chet is being loaded into an ambulance. Broken arm, possible concussion. Could have been killed. Should have been killed. If he'd been standing 6 inches to the left, we'd be planning a funeral. Fire department is here. OSHA investigators on the way. Insurance adjusters already taking photos. Police taking statements. And somewhere in the executive offices, Priscilla is probably still insisting that this wasn't her fault, that the real problem was our resistance to her inclusive stacking protocols. I've been doing this job for 22 years. Managed warehouses since I was 22. Learned from my father, who did it for 30 years before me. I know how physics works. I know how pallets stack. I know what happens when you ignore load-bearing limits. Because gravity doesn't care about your ideology. I warned them. We all warned them. They didn't listen. Now we're looking at millions in losses. A destroyed facility. A man in the hospital. And a supply chain that just stopped. In the middle of peak season. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a DEI consultant with zero warehouse experience destroyed a logistics operation that took 35 years to build. I started at Titan Logistics when I was 22. Entry level, loading trucks. Worked every position over the years. Forklift operator, picker, packer, receiver. Inventory control, shift supervisor. Finally made senior floor manager at 36. Been running this warehouse for 8 years. 350,000 square feet of distribution space. We handle inventory for retail chains, manufacturers. Everything from electronics to furniture to food products. Our job is simple but critical. Receive goods, store them safely, ship them on time. Sounds easy. It's not. Warehousing is a science. Every decision has physics behind it. Where you place inventory matters. How you stack pallets matters. Weight distribution, center of gravity, load-bearing capacity. Get any of it wrong, and things fall. Heavy things. On top of people. Our facility had an excellent safety record. 22 years without a major incident. Minor injuries, sure. That's warehouse work. But no fatalities, no major collapses. No major disasters. Because we respected the physics. Followed the protocols. Listened to experience. The team was mostly men. About 85% male workforce. Not because of discrimination. Because of the physical requirements. This job requires lifting 50 pounds repeatedly. Operating heavy machinery. Working in conditions that are demanding. Fewer women applied. Fewer women could meet the physical standards. The ones who did were solid workers. Nobody treated them differently. Same expectations, same respect. That's how it should be. Then corporate hired Priscilla. 38 years old. DEI consultant. Background in human resources and organizational equity. Never worked in a warehouse. Never operated a forklift. Never stacked a pallet. But she had theories about how we should do all those things. Holbrook, our operations director, brought her in. Said the company needed to modernize. Diversify the workforce. Address equity concerns in our hiring and operations. I didn't have a problem with that in principle. If qualified women wanted warehouse jobs, they should have the same opportunities. Nobody was stopping them. But that wasn't what Priscilla meant by equity. First week, she toured the facility. Took notes, observed operations. Asked questions that revealed her ignorance. Why do the heavy pallets go on the bottom? Why can't shorter workers access the top shelves? Why do forklift operators need to lift 75 pounds? If the forklift does the lifting, I tried to explain. Heavy pallets go on bottom because of physics. Top shelves are accessed by equipment, not people. Forklift operators need strength for manual tasks. Loading, unloading, securing freight. She nodded like she understood. But her eyes said she didn't believe me. Thought I was making excuses. For a system designed to exclude people. Second week, she presented her findings. Called it an equity assessment of warehouse operations. The presentation was alarming. She'd identified barriers to inclusion that were actually safety protocols. Physical lifting requirements discriminated against smaller workers. Height-based storage prioritization favored taller employees. Equipment operations standards created unnecessary gatekeeping. Pallet stacking protocols were designed by and for a male workforce, without considering alternative approaches. Her recommendations were worse. Reduce physical requirements to minimum necessary. Restructure storage to improve accessibility for all body types. Modify stacking protocols to enable participation by all workers. Expand equipment training to include modified operation methods. I raised my hand, asked to speak. Holbrook nodded reluctantly. I said these recommendations conflict with safety codes. Pallet stacking isn't arbitrary. It's based on physics, weight distribution, load-bearing capacity. You can't just change it for accessibility. You'll create structural instability. Priscilla smiled patiently, said she appreciated my perspective. But sometimes legacy systems needed challenging. Just because something had always been done one way didn't mean it was the best way. I said it's not about legacy. It's about gravity. Heavy things need to be on the bottom. Center of gravity needs to be low. Ignore that, and things collapse. On people. She said we could work together to find solutions that honored both safety and equity. But her tone said she'd already decided. I was the problem, not the physics. Month 2, the changes started. First was redistributing tasks. Previously, heavy lifting assignments went to workers who could physically handle them. Made sense. Now assignments were rotated equitably, regardless of physical capability. Some workers couldn't complete their assignments, had to ask for help, slowed everything down. More importantly, created frustration. Workers who could do the job efficiently had to stop and help those who couldn't. Production rates dropped 15% immediately. Then came the stacking modifications. Priscilla wanted lower maximum heights, so shorter workers could access inventory without equipment. I explained that wasn't how it worked. Warehouse shelving was designed for forklift access. Nobody accessed high shelves on foot. That's what the equipment was for. She said relying on equipment was a barrier. Not everyone was comfortable with machinery. We should create ground-accessible alternatives. I said that would require complete redesign. Reduce our storage capacity by 40%. She said we should explore the possibility. I documented my objections in writing. Sent them to Holbrook. He said to work with Priscilla. Find compromises. There's no compromise with physics. But I tried. Third modification was pallet configuration. Traditional stacking put heaviest items on bottom, built up in decreasing weight. Creates stable center of gravity. Priscilla wanted distributed stacking. Heavy and light items mixed throughout, so any worker could handle any level. I nearly lost my mind. Explained center of gravity again. Drew diagrams. Showed her what happens when top-heavy pallets get bumped. She said we could stabilize with additional strapping. I said strapping helps but doesn't replace physics. If the center of gravity is too high, the pallet tips. Strapping just means it tips as a unit, instead of shedding weight. She said I was being resistant, that experienced workers often struggled with change. But the company was committed to progress. I documented everything. Sent it to Holbrook, to safety, to anyone who'd listen. Got polite acknowledgments. And instructions to implement the changes. Ingrid from safety shared my concerns. She documented violations of standard protocols. Submitted reports to management. Got the same response. Work with the consultant. Find solutions. We were being told to find solutions. To physics. There are no solutions to physics. There's only compliance or consequences. Month 3, we started seeing problems. Pallets configured to Priscilla's specifications were unstable. You could see them wobble during transport. Forklift operators reported near misses. Loads shifting, threatening to tip. Darnell came to me after one incident. Said, "Boss, this is going to get someone killed." "I know," I said. "I've documented everything." "They won't listen." He asked what we were supposed to do. I said, "Follow the protocols they gave us. Document every near miss. Cover ourselves for when it goes wrong. Not if. When." We started an informal log. Every unstable load, every close call, every time someone had to grab a pallet to stop it tipping. 2 weeks in, we had 47 incidents documented. I compiled them into a report. Sent to Holbrook with urgent header. Requested immediate meeting to discuss safety concerns. He scheduled a meeting for the following week. Said he'd include Priscilla, so we could align on concerns. The collapse happened 3 days before that meeting. Thursday afternoon, peak operations. Everyone on the floor, maximum activity. Aisle 7 was our heavy goods section. Industrial equipment, machinery parts. Pallets weighing 2,000 pounds or more. Stacked according to Priscilla's new protocols. Distributed weight, mixed heavy and light. Center of gravity, way too high. A forklift was retrieving a pallet from level 3. Routine operation, done it thousands of times. But this pallet was configured wrong. Top heavy, unstable. When the forks engaged, the weight shifted. The pallet tipped forward. Hit the pallet in front of it, which was also top heavy. That one went into the racking structure. The structure that was loaded beyond safe limits. Because we'd compressed storage to account for reduced capacity. The first section of racking buckled. I heard the metal scream. That sound you never forget. Then, the domino effect started. One section failing put lateral pressure on the next, which was also overloaded, which failed into the next. For sections of heavy goods racking, collapsed in sequence. In maybe 8 seconds, 200,000 pounds of inventory. Coming down. Chet was in the aisle, checking inventory for a pick order. The only reason he's alive is he heard the first crack and started running. Didn't know which direction was safe. Just ran. Got hit by falling debris, but not crushed by the main collapse. Incredibly lucky. I was at the supervisor station when it happened. Felt the floor shake. Heard the noise. Ran toward it, then stopped. When I saw the scale of the collapse, called emergency services. Initiated evacuation procedures. Got everyone out who could walk. Found Chet half buried. Conscious, but in pain. Stayed with him until paramedics arrived. 4 hours to stabilize the scene. 10 hours before investigators could safely enter. 2 days before we had a full damage assessment. The numbers were devastating. 4 racking sections, total loss. $800,000 to replace. Inventory destroyed, $3.2 million retail value. Facility damage, another $400,000. But that was just the direct costs. The indirect costs were worse. We couldn't operate. A third of our warehouse was a debris field. The rest was potentially compromised. Structural engineers had to assess everything. That took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of zero operations. During peak season, contracts had delivery requirements. Penalties for non-performance. We breached 17 contracts. Drummond, our biggest client, pulled their business entirely. Said they couldn't trust us anymore. 3 others followed. Lost revenue, north of $15 million annually. Insurance sent adjusters. Took one look at Priscilla's protocol changes. Started asking very specific questions. The policy covered standard warehouse operations. Following industry safety standards. We weren't following industry standards. We were following Priscilla's equity standards, which violated multiple OSHA guidelines. The adjuster was blunt. This appears to be negligence. Your policy, doesn't cover negligence. $4.7 million in direct damages. Zero coverage. Plus liability exposure for Chet's injuries, who was now consulting with a lawyer. Understandably, the investigation was thorough. Outside engineering firm reviewed everything. Our documentation, Priscilla's changes, the incident reports we'd filed, the ones that had been ignored. Their conclusion was unambiguous. The collapse resulted from improper load distribution, in violation of standard warehouse protocols, and manufacturer specifications for the racking system. The modifications to stacking procedures created systematically unstable conditions. The incident was not an accident. It was an inevitable consequence of ignoring fundamental physics. The report named Priscilla's protocols specifically, identified each modification that contributed. Lower heavy items, higher light items, distributed weight. All of it created top-heavy conditions, compounded across hundreds of pallets, creating a warehouse full of tipping hazards. The report also noted the warnings we'd filed, the incident documentation, the requests for review that were ignored. Management had been informed of the risks and chose to proceed anyway. Holbrook was terminated immediately for authorizing changes that violated safety codes. Priscilla tried to deflect, said she'd relied on management to verify safety, said she wasn't an engineer, just a consultant offering suggestions. That defense might have worked if she hadn't repeatedly dismissed safety concerns in documented meetings, where she called physics resistance to change. She was terminated too, and named in the lawsuit Chet filed, along with the company. Pemberton, the CEO, held an all-hands meeting. First time I'd seen him on the floor in years. He looked exhausted and angry. Said he was sorry. Sorry the company had lost its way. Prioritized consultants over experience. Theory over practice. Ideology over physics. He announced immediate return to standard protocols. All of Priscilla's modifications reversed. Investment in safety training and equipment. And a new policy. No operational changes without floor manager approval. The people who actually did the work would have final say on how it was done. It was the right message, but it came months too late and cost us a man's health and millions of dollars and our reputation. Rebuilding took a year. New racking installed to higher specifications. Facility inspected and certified. Staff retrained on proper protocols. Clients slowly recruited back. Some returned when they saw we'd learned. Others never came back. Trust once broken is hard to rebuild. Chet recovered mostly. Arm healed. Concussion cleared. But he didn't come back to work. Took his settlement and retired early. Said he didn't feel safe in warehouses anymore. Couldn't hear metal creak without panicking. I understood. Some sounds stay with you. Darnell became my assistant manager. He'd been right all along. So had Ingrid. So had everyone who actually worked here. The only people who didn't see the disaster coming were the ones who didn't know anything about how warehouses actually worked. I'm still here. Still managing the floor. Still stacking pallets heavy on bottom, light on top. Still following physics. Because physics doesn't negotiate. Doesn't care about your intentions. Doesn't give credit for trying to be inclusive. Physics just is. And if you fight it, you lose. Every time. The whole experience taught me something about the limits of ideology. There are jobs where feelings matter, where process can be reimagined, where traditional methods can be improved. And there are jobs where physics rules, where reality has veto power, where ignoring expertise means things collapse. Literally collapse. On people. Priscilla didn't understand that distinction. She thought everything was socially constructed. That all systems were just choices. That could be reconfigured for equity. But gravity isn't a social construct. Weight distribution isn't a choice. Load-bearing limits aren't suggestions. They're laws. The kind you can't vote away. Or workshop into submission. My son is starting college now. interested in engineering. I told him this story as a warning about what happens when unqualified people make decisions about technical domains, about why expertise matters, why experience matters, why listening to the people who do the work matters more than listening to consultants who've never done it. He asked if I was angry at Priscilla. I said I used to be. Now I'm mostly sad. She genuinely believed she was helping, making things better, fairer, more inclusive. Never understood that her help was dangerous, that her fairness ignored reality, that her inclusion excluded physics. Some jobs require physical capability. That's not discrimination. That's just what the job is. You can't make gravity more equitable. You can only work with it, or get crushed by it. Anyway, that's the story of how a DEI consultant with zero warehouse experience changed our stacking protocols for equity, ignored every warning from experienced workers, created systematically unstable conditions, until 4 sections of racking collapsed, destroying $4.7 million in inventory, injuring one of my guys, voiding our insurance coverage, costing us our biggest clients, and proving once again that ideology doesn't beat physics. Never has. Never will. Heavy things go on the bottom. Center of gravity stays low. Loads respect weight limits. Workers who know the job make the decisions. These aren't suggestions. They're survival. And anyone who tells you different has never watched a warehouse collapse, while someone they know runs for their life. I have. Once was enough.